My father looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you do not show up, no one will even notice." He called me an extra in the movie of my own sister's life. I spent New Year's Eve alone in my studio apartment watching the fireworks on a muted television, or so I thought. At 11 p.m., a frantic knock on my door changed the trajectory of my entire existence. 2 weeks later, my face was on every billboard in Times Square, and those same parents were calling me 85 times a day, begging for forgiveness. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Brianna, and I am 29 years old. If you have ever been treated like a second-class citizen by your own blood, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. I want to hear your story in the comments because God knows I need to share mine. Let me take you back 30 hours before the ball dropped. The air inside my parents' $10 million estate in Atlanta smelled of expensive lilies and judgment. I was on my knees on the cold marble floor of the master suite dressing room. My mouth was full of sewing pins. The metallic taste of steel was the only thing keeping me from screaming. My younger sister Chloe stood on the pedestal like a statue of a goddess. She was wearing a $10,000 emerald silk gown that was currently cutting off her circulation. "Ouch, watch it, Brianna. You pricked me," Chloe shrieked, jerking her body and almost kicking me in the face. I took the pins out of my mouth and took a deep breath. "Chloe, if you stop moving, I can actually let out the seam. The silk is delicate, and you have grown about 2 inches in the waist since the last fitting." Chloe turned purple. "I have not gained weight. It is your cheap measuring tape that is wrong. Mom, tell her to stop sabotaging me." My mother Viola was sitting on the velvet chaise lounge scrolling through her iPad. She did not even look up. "Brianna, stop making excuses and just fix the dress. And please move your knees off the white rug. Those jeans you are wearing look like you found them in a dumpster. I do not want street dirt on my Persian carpet." I looked down at my jeans. They were vintage Levi's that I had upcycled with hand-embroidered sashiko stitching. In the world of sustainable fashion where I actually worked, they were considered art. In this house, they were considered trash. I shifted my weight onto the hard floor, my kneecaps aching. "I am sorry, Mom," I said quietly. "I just came straight from the workshop." My father Desmond walked in at that moment. He was already wearing his tuxedo even though the party was not until the next night. He held his phone up recording a video for his Instagram story. "And here is the star of the show," he announced, his voice booming with that fake charisma he saved for the public. "The beautiful Chloe getting ready to dazzle the elite of Atlanta. Look at that dress, folks, imported from Milan." He panned the camera down to me and immediately stopped recording. His smile vanished. "Brianna, are you still down there? The light is fading and I need to get a good photo of Chloe for the pre-party hype. Brad's family is landing from New York in an hour. We need everything to look perfect." I hurriedly stitched the side panel, trying to give Chloe room to breathe in the dress. My fingers were trembling. It was not just the physical labor, it was the atmosphere. In this house, I was not a daughter. I was a utility. I was the free tailor, the errand girl, the person you called when the toilet clogged, but not the person you invited to dinner. "Done," I whispered, biting the thread, because I had left my scissors in my bag. Chloe spun around, admiring herself in the three-way mirror. Finally, she huffed. "It is still a little tight in the ribs, but I guess it will have to do. You really need to get better tools, Brianna." I stood up, brushing the lint off my knees. My back cracked. I had been driving for an hour to get here and had been working on this dress for 2 hours straight. I was exhausted, so I said, trying to sound casual as I packed my sewing kit, "What is the plan for tomorrow?" The invitation said cocktails start at 7, but I can come earlier if you need help setting up the decor. I actually made a custom jacket that I think would match the theme perfectly. The room went silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Chloe stopped twirling. My father put his phone in his pocket. My mother finally put down her iPad and took off her reading glasses. They exchanged a look. That look. The one that meant they had discussed something unpleasant and were now forcing the other person to deliver the bad news. My mother cleared her throat. She picked up a crystal glass of water and took a small sip, stalling. "Actually, Brianna," she started, her voice overly smooth. "We were talking about tomorrow night. And with the guest list being so tight this year," she trailed off. "What do you mean?" I asked. My father stepped forward. "Look, Brianna, let us be realistic. This is not just a family party. This is a networking event. Brad's parents are coming down from the Hamptons. The Huntingtons are old money, real money. They are conservative. They care about image and pedigree. And I am what chopped liver?" I asked, my voice rising. "I am your daughter." Chloe laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Brianna, look at you. You sell used clothes on the internet. You live in a studio apartment that smells like bleach and old fabric. You drive a rusted Honda. If you show up in your patchwork jackets and start talking about saving the planet, you are going to embarrass us." "Chloe, that is enough," my mother said, but she did not sound angry. She sounded like she agreed. "Brianna, listen to your mother," my father said, checking his watch. "We are just thinking about the optics. This night is about Chloe. It is her moment to shine with Brad's family. We want them to propose. We want that merger. If you are there, you will just be a distraction." "A distraction," I repeated. "Honey," my mother said, standing up and walking over to me. She placed a hand on my shoulder, but there was no warmth in it. "Think of it like a movie. Chloe is the lead actress. Brad is the leading man. And you? Well, you are just an extra. And extras do not belong in the spotlight. They belong in the background. Or better yet, offset completely." I felt like she had slapped me. An extra. 29 years of trying to please them, of getting straight A's, of starting my own business, of being the good, quiet daughter. And I was just an extra. "So I am uninvited," I stated. It was not a question. My father chuckled nervously. "Do not be dramatic. We are just saying maybe you sit this one out. Stay home. Watch the countdown on TV. Relax. Honestly, Brianna, if you do not show up, no one will even notice. It is not like anyone is coming to see you." My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear that emerald dress off Chloe's ungrateful body. But I didn't. I had learned a long time ago that crying only gave them power. I zipped up my bag. My hands were steady now, cold as ice. "Okay," I said. My mother looked relieved. She reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp $50 bill. "Here," she said, tucking it into the pocket of my shirt like I was a stripper or a waitress. "Go buy yourself a nice pizza tomorrow night. Treat yourself. And thank you for fixing the dress. You really do have a knack for needlework even if you waste it on garbage." I looked at the money. Then I looked at them. The perfect family. The golden child sister. The wealthy parents. They looked beautiful on the outside, but standing there in that dressing room, I realized they were rotting from the inside out. I took the $50. "Thank you, Mother," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I hope the dress holds together." I turned around and walked out of the bedroom, down the grand staircase, and out the front door. The winter air in Atlanta was biting cold, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house. As I walked to my beat-up Honda Civic, I did not look back. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the $50 bill. My father was right. No one would notice if the extra didn't show up. But what he didn't know was that the extra was about to rewrite the entire script. I drove home in silence. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just planned. The next 30 hours were a blur of loneliness. I saw the Instagram stories start to pop up, the decorations, the caterers, Chloe posting selfies with the caption, "So blessed to be surrounded by people who match my energy." I sat in my studio surrounded by scraps of denim, velvet, and silk. This was my kingdom. My parents called it garbage, but I saw potential in things other people threw away. Maybe that was why I related to the fabric so much. I was the discard pile of the Jenkins family. New Year's Eve arrived. The clock struck 10 p.m. I was wearing sweatpants eating the pizza my mother had so generously paid for. I had blocked their numbers for the night so I wouldn't have to see the photos of Brad's family sneering at the waiters. Then at 10:45 my phone buzzed. Not a text. An alert from my building's security app. Someone was at the main entrance. I ignored it. Probably a delivery for a neighbor. Then a knock on my door. Heavy. Urgent. I frowned. I lived in a gritty part of town. People didn't just knock on doors at this hour unless it was trouble. I grabbed my heavy fabric shears just in case and crept to the door. "Who is it?" I called out. A woman's voice muffled and stressed. "Are you Brianna Jenkins, the one on Instagram? The upcycler?" I hesitated. "Yes." "Open the door. Please, it is an emergency. We have money." I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door an inch. Standing in my hallway were three massive bodyguards in black suits and a petite woman holding a garment bag that looked like it had been through a war. She pushed past me into the apartment, not waiting for an invitation. "We have a problem," she said, throwing the bag onto my work table. "A big problem. And you are the only person in this city who can fix it." "Who are you?" I asked, gripping my scissors. The woman unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress. Not just any dress. A couture gown covered in Swarovski crystals. But the back was completely blown out. The zipper was shredded, and the delicate lace was torn. The woman looked at me wild-eyed. "This belongs to Serena Vance." I dropped my scissors. Serena Vance, the biggest pop star on the planet, the woman who was currently scheduled to perform the midnight set live from Atlanta in less than 2 hours. "She is in the car downstairs," the woman hissed. "Her stylist quit 5 minutes ago. This dress was custom made in Paris and it just exploded. We found your profile. We saw what you did with that vintage wedding dress last week. Can you fix this?" I looked at the dress. It was ruined. To fix it traditionally would take days. "I cannot fix this," I said. The woman's face fell. "Please, she will pay anything. I cannot fix it." I repeated, walking over to the table and running my hand over the torn lace. "But I can remake it." I looked at the woman. "Bring her up. Now. Bring her up. Yes. Bring Serena Vance into my studio apartment. If she wants to look good at midnight, she has to trust the extra." 5 minutes later, the Queen of Pop walked into my tiny room wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, looking terrified. But that is a story for the next part. Because while my sister was clinking glasses of champagne thinking she had won the lottery, I was about to turn a pile of scraps into a weapon of mass destruction. The room seemed to shrink the moment Serena Vance stepped inside. Even wrapped in an oversized gray hoodie and dark sunglasses, she radiated an energy that made the air crackle. She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were red-rimmed from crying. The most famous woman in the world looked terrified. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I am supposed to be on a helicopter to the stadium in 20 minutes. My stylist just quit. My dress is a disaster. And my manager tells me I am betting my entire career on a girl who lives in a warehouse." I did not answer. I walked over to the garment bag the manager had thrown on my table and unzipped it fully. It was worse than I thought. The silver couture gown was stunning, but the structural boning in the corset had snapped, puncturing the silk and shredding the zipper track. It was a $10,000 pile of scrap. "Can you fix it?" the manager asked, hovering over my shoulder. Her phone was buzzing incessantly. "We need to leave in 45 minutes maximum." I ran my fingers over the torn silk. The fabric was too compromised. If I tried to just sew it back together, it would burst open again the moment Serena hit a high note. "No," I said. Serena let out a choked sob. "I knew it. It is over. I am going to have to go out there in sweatpants." I looked up at her. "I said I cannot fix it. I did not say I cannot save you. But we are not going to use this dress. It is dead." "What are you talking about?" the manager snapped. "That is a custom Galliano." "It is garbage," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I grabbed my heavy shears. "But the crystals are usable." Before anyone could stop me, I jammed the scissors into the $10,000 dress and ripped the bodice away from the skirt. The sound of tearing silk echoed through the silent apartment. "Are you insane?" the manager shrieked, lunging forward. The bodyguards stepped in confused, not sure if they should tackle me or protect me. Serena held up a hand, stopping them. "Let her work. We have nothing to lose." I looked around my studio. I needed fabric. Strong fabric. Something that could hold structure but look regal. My eyes landed on the tall windows covering the far wall. They were draped in heavy vintage red velvet curtains I had salvaged from an old theater downtown. I dragged a stepladder over and ripped the curtains down in one violent motion. Dust motes danced in the air. "Velvet Serena?" asked, skepticism creeping into her voice. "Velvet and denim," I said, grabbing a stack of vintage Levi's from my shelf. "High and low, street and royal. It is brave, it is sustainable, it is Atlanta. Do you trust me?" Serena looked at the clock. It was 11:10. "I trust you," she whispered. "Make me shine." For the next 40 minutes, I ceased to be Brianna the extra. I ceased to be the disappointment's daughter. I entered a state of absolute flow. My mind, which usually raced with anxiety, went completely silent except for the calculations of angles and seams. I threw the red velvet onto my cutting table. I did not measure. I did not pin. I cut by instinct, draping the heavy fabric directly onto Serena's body over her bodysuit. "Hold this," I commanded, pointing to one of the massive bodyguards. The man looked at his boss, then stepped forward and held the fabric against Serena's waist with a trembling finger. I ran to my sewing machine. The motor roared to life. I was sewing denim panels onto the velvet, creating a corset structure that was stronger than steel but soft to the touch. I took the crystals from the ruined silver dress and hand-tacked them onto the denim, creating a constellation of stars crashing into the red velvet. The manager was pacing in the corner, listing off lawsuits she was going to file if this failed. I tuned her out. The only sound I heard was the rhythm of the needle punching through fabric. Then disaster struck. With 20 minutes left on the clock, a loud crack filled the room. The tip of my heavy-duty needle had snapped off, hitting a thick seam of denim. "No, no, no," I whispered. The machine jammed. A bird's nest of thread tangled in the bobbin case. "What happened?" the manager yelled, running over. "Why did you stop?" The needle broke. I said, my hands shaking for the first time. I tried to pull the fabric free, but it was stuck. "We are out of time," Serena said, her voice flat. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. "I look like a half-finished craft project." I closed my eyes. I saw my father's face. "No one will notice if you do not show up." "I am not going to let you fail," I growled. I grabbed a screwdriver and dismantled the throat plate of the machine in 10 seconds flat. I ripped the tangled thread out with my teeth. I slammed a new titanium needle into the bar. "Turn on the steamer," I yelled to the manager. She blinked. "What?" I said, "Turn on the steamer now," I roared. "And you," pointing to the second bodyguard, "get me the fabric glue and the heat gun from the shelf." Suddenly, the room shifted. I was not the girl who sat at the kids' table. I was the captain of this ship. The manager ran to the steamer. The bodyguard scrambled for the glue. I sewed like a woman possessed. The red velvet skirt flowed from the denim corset like a river of blood and wine. It was dramatic. It was dangerous. It was unlike anything Serena Vance had ever worn. 11:45. "Done," I screamed, cutting the final thread. The room fell silent. Serena stepped back from the fitting area. She walked to the full-length mirror I had propped against the wall. The dress was a masterpiece of chaos and control. The vintage denim hugged her curves, perfectly armored and tough, while the theater velvet cascaded down her legs, giving her the silhouette of a warrior queen. The crystals I had salvaged caught the light of the single bulb overhead, turning her into a galaxy. Serena touched the rough denim bodice. She looked at herself, then she looked at me. "I have never felt more powerful," she whispered. "We have to go," the manager said, checking her watch, but her voice was different now. It was full of awe. The helicopter is waiting. Serena grabbed my hands. Her palms were warm. What is your name? She asked. Brianna, I said. Brianna Jenkins. Well, Brianna Jenkins, Serena said, pulling her hood up over the masterpiece I had just created. You just saved my life. And I always pay my debts. She turned to her manager. Get her number, get her bank account, and get her a lawyer. She is going to need one because after tonight, everyone is going to want a piece of her. The bodyguards surrounded her and swept her out of the apartment as quickly as they had arrived. The door slammed shut. I was alone again. The room was a wreck. Scraps of red velvet and denim littered the floor. My sewing machine was smoking slightly. The pizza was cold. I walked over to the window and looked down. I saw the black SUV peel out of the parking lot and speed toward the stadium. I looked at the clock, 11:50. I turned on my TV. The local news was broadcasting the countdown live from the stadium. The announcers were speculating about what Serena would wear. Rumors of a Parisian gown. Rumors of diamonds. I sat on the floor amidst the ruin of my curtains and waited. 10, 9, 8. The crowd on TV roared. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. Fireworks exploded over the Atlanta skyline. And on the screen, Serena Vance rose from beneath the stage on a hydraulic lift. The lights hit her. The red velvet blazed like fire. The denim sparkled with recycled diamonds. The crowd went silent for a split second and then erupted. It was not just a dress, it was a statement. My phone, which had been silent all night, buzzed. Unknown number. I picked it up. Turn up the volume, the text read. On the screen, the music stopped. Serena held the microphone. She looked directly into the camera lens, and I swore she was looking right into my dark, lonely apartment. Who are you wearing? Serena, the host, screamed over the noise. Is it Dior? Is it Versace? Serena smiled, a smile that was sharp and dangerous. No, she said. This is a Brianna Jenkins original. She is a genius in a warehouse downtown, and she is the future of fashion. My phone buzzed again. Then it started to vibrate continuously like a living thing. I looked at the screen. Mom calling, Dad calling, Chloe calling, Mom calling. 85 missed calls in 2 minutes. I looked at the phone dancing on the table. Then I looked at the TV where my work was being broadcast to millions of people. I picked up the phone, and I turned it off. Let them wait. The extra had just stolen the show. While I sat in the semi-darkness of my studio apartment surrounded by the debris of my frantic creativity, the Jenkins family. New Year's Eve gala was reaching its peak of orchestrated boredom. I did not need to be there to know exactly what was happening. I knew the script by heart because I had watched it play out for 29 years. My father Desmond was undoubtedly cornering Mr. Huntington near the open bar, talking loudly about synergy and market cap, while Brad's father checked his Rolex and looked for an exit strategy. My mother Viola would be circulating the room with a frozen smile, making sure no one placed a drink on a coasterless surface, silently judging the net worth of every guest. And then there was Chloe, my beautiful golden sister. I could picture her perfectly. She would be standing in the center of the room, desperately trying to be the gravitational pull of the evening. She would be laughing a little too loudly at jokes that were not funny, tilting her head to catch the light, so her diamond earrings sparkled just right for the photographers. She was playing the role of the perfect debutante, the future wife of a banking heir, but the audience was not buying tickets. The air in that mansion was likely thick with polite indifference. The Huntingtons were old money New York. They had seen bigger houses, better jewelry, and more desperate social climbers than my parents could ever imagine. To them, this party was just an obligation, a checkbox on a social calendar, before they could go back to their real lives. Back in my studio, the only light came from the 60-inch television screen mounted on the brick wall. I had turned the volume up until the bass of the live concert shook the floorboards. The energy in Times Square was electric, a chaotic ocean of humanity huddled together in the freezing cold, waiting for a miracle. They were screaming, They were crying. They were alive. It was the exact opposite of the sterile mausoleum my parents called a home. I pulled my knees to my chest. My hands were still stained blue from the denim dye. My fingers were raw. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm of a gambler who has pushed every single chip into the center of the table and is waiting for the dealer to turn the final card. I had given Serena Vance not just a dress but my soul stitched together with velvet and thread. If it fell apart, if she looked ridiculous, my career was over before it began. But if it worked, if my vision translated to the stage, everything would change. The countdown clock on the screen hit 60 seconds. The camera panned over the crowd in New York. People were kissing. Confetti was being loaded into cannons. The anticipation was a physical weight in the room. I wondered if my family was watching. They usually turned the TV on right before midnight just to count down with the rest of the world pretending they were part of the zeitgeist. I imagined my father grabbing the remote muttering about how loud the music was while my mother critiqued the outfits of the hosts. 10 seconds. I stopped breathing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. The ball dropped. A million voices screamed in unison. Fireworks exploded over the Hudson River, painting the sky in gold and silver. But my eyes were glued to the massive stage in the center of the square. Smoke billowed out, covering the platform in a thick white fog. The opening chords of Serena Vance's hit anthem started to play. It was a slow, heavy beat that vibrated in my chest. Then the lights cut through the smoke, red, deep blood red. And there she was. A gasp escaped my throat. Seeing it in my apartment was one thing, but seeing it on screen illuminated by a million watts of stage lighting was a spiritual experience. Serena stood like a conqueror. The red velvet skirt I had ripped from my own windows flowed around her like a royal cape cascading down the stairs of the stage. It looked heavy, expensive, and ancient. But as she stepped forward, the lights caught the bodice. The vintage denim scarred and faded armored her torso like a modern Joan of Arc. The crystals I had obsessively glued and stitched sparked and danced, creating a blinding constellation against the rough blue fabric. It was high fashion meeting street grit. It was the story of Atlanta. It was the story of me. Serena grabbed the microphone stand. She did not just sing, she roared. She moved with a ferocity I had never seen before. The dress moved with her. The denim held her tight, making her look strong and invincible, while the velvet swirled, creating drama with every step. She looked dangerous. She looked undeniable. I watched mesmerized as the camera cut to the crowd. People were crying. Girls were reaching out, trying to touch the hem of that velvet skirt. Social media feeds began scrolling at the bottom of the screen, and I saw the comments flying by too fast to read. What is she wearing? That look is iconic. Is that denim and velvet? Who made that? The song ended. Serena stood center stage, chest heaving, sweat glistening on her skin. The applause was deafening. It sounded like thunder rolling across the city. The host of the broadcast, a man with perfect teeth and a tuxedo, ran onto the stage looking genuinely stunned. "Serena," he shouted over the noise. "That performance was historic. But we have to talk about this look. I have never seen anything like it. You look like a queen of the revolution. Who are you wearing tonight? Is this Galliano? Is this Alexander McQueen?" Serena laughed. It was a rich, throaty sound. She looked directly into the camera lens. Her eyes were fierce behind the sunglasses she had put back on. "No, Ryan?" she said, her voice booming through the speakers of my TV and through the speakers of every TV in America, including the 80-inch screen in my parents' ballroom. "This is not Paris. This is not Milan. This is Atlanta." She pointed a manicured finger at the lens. "This masterpiece was created tonight in a warehouse by a woman named Brianna Jenkins." My heart stopped. She said my name. She actually said my name. The host looked confused for a split second. "Brianna Jenkins. I do not think I know that label." "You will," Serena said. "She is a genius. She took a disaster and turned it into art in 2 hours. Remember the name America. Brianna Jenkins. She is the future. The feed cut to a commercial, but I was no longer watching. I was frozen, staring at the black space where her face had been. At that exact moment across town in the mansion on the hill, the scene must have been catastrophic. I learned later from a cousin who was catering the event that the moment Serena spoke my name, my mother dropped her crystal champagne flute. It shattered on the floor, spraying vintage Dom Perignon all over Chloe's emerald dress. My father, who had been mid-sentence bragging about his stock portfolio, choked on his drink. But the worst cut, the deepest wound for them, came from Mrs. Huntington. Brad's mother, the matriarch of the banking dynasty, the woman whose approval they were desperate to secure, put down her drink and looked at the screen with genuine interest. "Brianna Jenkins," she asked loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Is that your other daughter? The one you said was not important? That dress is magnificent. It is avant-garde. It is brilliant. Why is she not here?" The silence that followed must have been delicious. Chloe stood there overshadowed at her own engagement party by a sister who wasn't even in the room. The extra had just stolen the spotlight, and she didn't even have to walk on stage to do it. In my apartment, the silence was broken by a sound that would become the soundtrack of my new life. Bzzzt. My phone, which had been silent all night, buzzed. Bzzzt. Bzzzt. It moved across the wood, driven by the force of the notification. Bzzzt. 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 I walked over to it slowly, like it was a bomb. I turned it over. The lock screen was a blur of light. Instagram followers were ticking up by the 1,000 every second. My email inbox was refreshing so fast it looked like a slot machine. Subject: interview request, Vogue magazine. Subject: custom commission request, stylist for Beyoncé. Subject: investment opportunity. And then the calls began. Mom calling, Dad calling, Chloe calling, Mom calling. The phone danced on the table, rattling against the scissors and the spools of thread. It was an angry, desperate sound. They were calling, not to congratulate me. I knew them too well for that. They were calling to control the narrative. They were calling to remind me of my place. They were calling to claim credit. I reached out my hand, hovering over the decline button. For 29 years, I had answered every call. I had come running every time they snapped their fingers. I had fixed every hem, baked every cake, and absorbed every insult. But tonight, I was not Brianna the extra. I was Brianna the genius. Serena Vance said so. I watched the screen light up with my mother's face, a picture I had taken of her smiling at a garden party, a smile that never reached her eyes when she looked at me. I let it ring. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then I did it again when my father called. And again when Chloe called. 100 notifications. 200. 500. I picked up the phone, walked over to my window, and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my family was scrambling, trying to explain to the Huntingtons why they had hidden a prodigy in the attic. Somewhere out there, the world was learning my name. I turned the phone off completely. I poured myself a glass of tap water, raised it to the empty room, and whispered, "Happy New Year, Brianna." The real show was just getting started. The morning sun hit the dirty brick wall of my apartment at an angle I had never noticed before. It was January 1st, the start of a new year. I peeled my face off the denim quilt I had collapsed on a few hours earlier. My body ached. My fingers were stiff and swollen from the marathon of sewing I had performed the night before. For a split second, I thought it was a dream. I thought I had imagined Serena Vance standing in my kitchen. I thought I had imagined the red velvet dress. Then I looked at my work table. It was covered in scraps of red fabric and loose Swarovski crystals that caught the morning light like diamond dust. The empty garment bag with the Vance Management logo was still sitting on the chair. It was real. I reached for my phone. The battery had died sometime during the night after vibrating itself into oblivion. I plugged it into the charger and waited. The moment the screen flickered to life, it nearly crashed again. The numbers were staggering. My Instagram account, which had 2,000 followers yesterday, now had 400,000. My inbox was full, my direct messages were broken, and my name, Brianna Jenkins, was trending on Twitter right below Happy New Year. I sat on the floor and laughed. It was a dry, hysterical sound. Yesterday I was invisible. Today I was a hashtag. I was just about to stand up and find some coffee when the sound returned. Bam, bam, bam. The knocking on my door. My stomach dropped. I thought maybe it was the press. Maybe the paparazzi had found out where the mystery designer lived. I walked to the door, pulling my oversized t-shirt down and tightening my ponytail. I looked through the peephole, expecting to see cameras. I did not see cameras. I saw a pastel polo shirt. I saw a cashmere sweater. I saw a perfectly made-up face that I knew better than my own. It was my parents, and Chloe. I stepped back. My first instinct was to lock the deadbolt and hide. I did not want them in my space. This apartment was the only thing I owned that they had not touched. But I knew them. If I did not open the door, they would stand there all day. They would make a scene. They would call the landlord. I took a deep breath. I channeled the energy Serena Vance had left in this room. I was the genius. They were the audience. I unlocked the door and swung it open. "Surprise!" my mother yelled. Viola Jenkins stood there holding a wicker basket that looked like it came from a Martha Stewart catalog. She was wearing a smile that was so bright and so fake it actually hurt my eyes. Behind her, my father Desmond was beaming, his chest puffed out like a rooster, and Chloe was standing in the back holding her phone up, filming everything. "Brianna, darling, we brought breakfast," my mother cooed, pushing past me into the apartment without asking. "I know how much you love blueberry muffins from that bakery in Buckhead. I had your father drive all the way there this morning just for you. I hate blueberries. I have been allergic to them since I was 6. But my mother had conveniently forgotten that detail in her rush to perform the role of the doting parent. I stood by the open door, stunned by the sheer audacity of their presence. 10 hours ago they had told me I was an extra. They had told me to disappear. Now they were invading my sanctuary with pastries I could not eat. "Can we come in?" my father asked, though he was already walking toward my work table. He looked around the messy industrial space with a critical eye, but instead of sneering like he usually did, he nodded approvingly. "Wow, look at this place," he said, his voice loud and theatrical. "You can really feel the creative energy in here. It is raw. It is authentic. This is where the magic happens, right, Brianna?" He turned to me and opened his arms for a hug. I stood frozen. My father had not hugged me in 5 years. He wrapped his arms around me and patted my back firmly. He smelled of expensive cologne and desperation. "I saw what you did last night, kiddo," he whispered in my ear. "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable." I pulled away. "I thought you said no one would notice if I showed up," I said, my voice flat. Desmond laughed. A booming, hearty laugh that filled the small room. He looked at my mother and winked. "Oh, Brianna, you have to understand," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "That was the strategy. That was the push you needed. I knew if I challenged you, if I made you angry, you would produce your best work. I was playing the bad guy so you could be the hero. It is basic psychology, honey. I set the stage for you to shine." I stared at him. The gaslighting was so smooth, so professional, it was almost impressive. He was rewriting history in real time. He was taking credit for my success by claiming his cruelty was actually tough love. Before I could respond, Chloe popped out from behind him. She had a ring light attached to her phone case, and she shoved the camera inches from my face. "Hey guys, look who I found," she chirped, using her high-pitched influencer voice. "It is the woman of the hour, my big sister Brianna. We are hanging out at her studio this morning celebrating her massive win." She grabbed my arm and pulled me into the frame, squeezing her cheek against mine. I could smell her hairspray. Her skin was cold. "Tell the fans how you feel, Bri," Chloe said, looking at her own reflection in the screen. "We have been keeping this secret for so long, guys. It was so hard not to tell you that Brianna was working with Serena. But the Jenkins sisters always move in silence, right? She said. We move in silence. I looked at the camera. I looked at the comments rolling up on her live stream. She is amazing. You guys look so much alike. Supportive sister goals. I felt bile rise in my throat. They were eating it up. The world saw a loving family celebrating a victory. They did not see the text messages on my phone telling me I was worthless. They did not see the $50 bill sitting on the counter that was supposed to be my severance pay from this family. I gently pulled my arm away from Chloe. I am really tired, Chloe, I said. I need some coffee. Chloe laughed and kept filming. She is so humble, you guys. She works so hard. Look at this studio. She started panning the camera around the room, filming my fabric stacks, my sketches, my private sanctuary. Hey, do not film that, I said, stepping forward. Those are private designs. Oh, relax, Brianna, my father said, sitting down on my only chair, the one I used for sewing. You are famous now. The world wants to see your process. You have to strike while the iron is hot. We need to capitalize on this momentum. He used the word "we" again. My mother began unpacking the basket on my cutting table, moving my scissors and chalk aside as if they were trash. She laid out the muffins, a thermos of coffee, and linen napkins. Come sit down, darling, she said, patting the stool next to her. We have so much to discuss. Your father has been on the phone all morning. The phone at the house has not stopped ringing. Everyone wants to know if you are taking new clients. She poured coffee into a travel mug I had left on the table. We were thinking, my mother continued, handing me the coffee, that we should host a proper launch party for you. Not that little thing last night. A real Jenkins party. We can do it at the club next weekend. Invite the press, invite the Huntingtons. Brad's mother was asking all about you. I took the coffee. It was lukewarm. Brad's mother was asking about me, I repeated. Oh, she loved the dress, my father interjected. She actually asked why we had been hiding you. Can you believe that? I told her we were just waiting for the right moment to unveil your talent. I looked at the three of them. My father, the opportunist. My mother, the enabler. My sister, the parasite. They sat in my dusty, drafty apartment wearing their expensive clothes, eating muffins. I was allergic to planning a party to celebrate a talent they had mocked 24 hours ago. I realized then what I was to them. I was not a daughter. I was not a sister. I was an asset. Yesterday I was a liability, a stain on their perfect image. Today I was a commodity that had suddenly spiked in value. And like good investors, they were scrambling to acquire as much stock as possible before the market realized they had never owned me in the first place. I sipped the coffee. It tasted bitter. I looked at Chloe, who was now taking selfies with my sewing machine. I looked at my father, who was texting on his phone, probably bragging to his golf buddies. I could have kicked them out. I could have screamed at them to get out of my house. I could have played the recording of them insulting me, but I didn't. Not yet. Because I saw something else in their eyes. Underneath the greed and the fake pride there was fear. They were terrified that I would leave them behind. They were terrified that the extra had become the director, and they did not know their lines anymore. I smiled. It was a small, cold smile. A launch party sounds interesting, I said quietly. My mother clapped her hands. I knew you would be sensible. We will handle everything. You just focus on doing your little sewing thing. My little sewing thing. Even when they needed me, they could not help but minimize me. My father stood up. Great. Settled. Now get dressed, Brianna. We are going to lunch. I am not hungry, I said. Nonsense, he boomed. The Huntingtons invited us to brunch at the St. Regis, all of us. Brad's mother specifically asked for you. You cannot say no to old money, Brianna. That is not how the game is played. I looked at the garment bag with Serena's name on it. Then I looked at my family. Okay, I said. Let me change. I walked behind my changing screen. I could hear them whispering. See, I told you she would come around. My mother hissed. She needs us. She does not know how to handle this kind of attention. She is still wearing those rags, Chloe muttered. I hope she puts on something decent. I took off my t-shirt. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw the exhaustion in my eyes, but I also saw something new. I saw leverage. They wanted to show me off to the Huntingtons. They wanted to use me as a trophy to secure their merger with the wealthy banking family. Fine, I thought, pulling on a black turtleneck. I will go to brunch. I will sit at their table. I will eat their food. But I am not going as their daughter. I am going as a spy. I walked out from behind the screen. I am ready, I said. Let the performance begin. The dining room of the St. Regis Hotel was a study in oppressive elegance. The ceilings were 20 feet high, painted with frescoes of cherubs that seemed to be looking down at the tables, judging the net worth of everyone eating lunch. The air smelled of white truffle oil and old money. I sat at a round table covered in a tablecloth so white it hurt my eyes. My mother Viola was vibrating with anxiety. She kept rearranging the silverware and checking her reflection in the back of a spoon. My father Desmond was pretending to read the wine list, but I could see his eyes darting toward the entrance every 3 seconds. Chloe sat next to me. She had changed into a pastel pink Chanel suit that looked like it belonged on a doll. She was gripping her clutch so hard her knuckles were white. I was the ink stain on their perfect white canvas. I was wearing my black turtleneck and wide-leg trousers. I had pulled my hair back into a severe bun. I felt like a spy in enemy territory. "They are here," my father hissed, straightening his tie. The Huntingtons did not walk into a room. They floated in on a cloud of entitlement. Brad's father was a tall gray man who looked like he owned the bank because he actually did. Brad looked like a younger, softer version of him, but the center of gravity was Mrs. Huntington. She was a small woman with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob. She wore no makeup, and her jewelry was discreet, but I knew enough about fashion to know that her vintage brooch was worth more than my parents' entire house. My family stood up in unison like well-trained dogs. "Mrs. Huntington," my mother chirped, her voice an octave higher than normal. "We are so honored you could join us." Mrs. Huntington did not smile. She looked at my mother, then at my father, then at Chloe. Her gaze was like a laser scanner at a checkout counter. "Sit down, Viola," she said. "We are not at court." We all sat. The tension was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Waiters appeared instantly, pouring sparkling water and offering menus. Chloe immediately launched into her rehearsed speech. She turned to Mrs. Huntington with a blinding smile. "Oh, Catherine, I have to tell you about the wedding flowers. I found this amazing florist in Paris who specializes in rare peonies. Brad and I were thinking we could fly them in for the ceremony. It would be so romantic." Mrs. Huntington picked up her menu and did not look up. "Peonies die in 4 hours," she said flatly. "Unless you plan on having a funeral immediately after the reception, I would suggest something heartier." Chloe's smile faltered. She looked at Brad for support, but he was busy buttering a roll, avoiding eye contact. "Right," Chloe stammered. "Good point. Maybe roses then. Or lilies." Mrs. Huntington lowered her menu. She looked across the table directly at me. "You are the sister," she said. "The one from the television." I felt every eye at the table snap to me. My father opened his mouth to interrupt, probably to claim credit again, but Mrs. Huntington held up a hand, silencing him. "I am speaking to her, Desmond," she said. She looked at me with eyes that were cold but intelligent. "I saw the broadcast last night," she continued. "That was not just sewing, that was architecture. You took a structured bodice and fused it with a fluid skirt, using materials that should not work together, denim and velvet. It was a risk." "Why did you do it?" It was not a polite dinner conversation question. It was a challenge. She was testing me. I took a sip of water. I decided to tell the truth. "Serena needed armor," I said. "She is a performer, but she was feeling vulnerable. The zipper broke because the dress was fighting her body. I wanted to give her something that protected her, but also allowed her to take up space. The denim is the armor. The velvet is the royalty. It is about balance." Mrs. Huntington nodded slowly. "And the stitching?" she asked. I noticed the white thread on the bodice. It looked intentional, like kintsugi. I was stunned. Kintsugi was the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, emphasizing the cracks rather than hiding them. It was the core philosophy of my work. Exactly, I said, leaning forward, forgetting for a moment that I was supposed to be the silent extra. It is called sashiko. It is a Japanese mending technique. The idea is that the repair makes the object more beautiful than it was when it was new. I do not believe in hiding the work. I believe the struggle is part of the beauty. Mrs. Huntington stared at me. For the first time, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. Fascinating, she murmured. Most people in this city are obsessed with looking new, looking perfect. You are interested in what is real. That is a rare quality. Under the table, I felt a sharp pain in my shin. Ow! I didn't say it out loud, but I flinched. Chloe had kicked me with her designer heel. I glanced at her. She was smiling at Mrs. Huntington, but her eyes were burning with pure venom. She was the bride. She was the golden child. She was supposed to be the one impressing the matriarch. And here I was, the family failure bonding with the most intimidating woman in Atlanta over Japanese philosophy. My mother sensed the shift in power and tried to intervene. Yes, well, Brianna has always been very eclectic, my mother said with a nervous laugh. But Chloe has such a wonderful eye for interior design. She picked out all the curtains for Brad's new condo. Mrs. Huntington ignored her. She kept her eyes on me. I have a collection of vintage kimonos, she said. Some of them are falling apart. I have never trusted anyone to touch them. But I might trust you. Would you be willing to look at them? I would be honored, I said. That is settled then, Mrs. Huntington said, picking up her fork. You will come to the estate on Tuesday. The table went silent. An invitation to the Huntington estate was something my parents had been chasing for 5 years, and I had just gotten one in 5 minutes. Brad cleared his throat. He looked annoyed. His ego was bruised because his mother was ignoring his trophy wife. Mother, let us not get carried away, he said with a condescending chuckle. He reached over and patted my hand on the table, a gesture that felt more like a restraint than affection. Brianna had a lucky night, Brad said, but let us be real. She usually spends her time patching up old jeans for hipsters or making quilts for charity. She is not exactly a couturier. I think Serena Vance was just desperate. He looked at me with a smirk. No offense, Brianna. We are all proud of you. But let us not pretend you are on the same level as the designers my mother usually wears. It was a fluke. Chloe let out a small breath of relief. She looked at Brad with gratitude. Finally, someone was putting me back in my place. Yes, Chloe chimed in. Brianna is very crafty, but she doesn't really know the luxury market. She is more rustic. My father laughed too loud. Rustic. That is the perfect word. Our little rustic artist. I gripped my napkin under the table. The shame was familiar. It was the old script. Whenever I shined, they had to dim the lights. Whenever I stood up, they had to cut me down. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to tell them about the commission request sitting in my inbox, but a sharp voice cut through the air. Stop talking, Brad. Mrs. Huntington placed her fork down on her plate with a deliberate click. The sound echoed in the silent dining room. She turned to her son. You are confusing price with value, she said, her voice icy. Anyone with a credit card can buy a label. Anyone can hire a stylist to dress them in the latest trend. That requires zero talent. That only requires a bank account, which, by the way, you inherited from your father. Brad turned red. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. What this young woman did last night, Mrs. Huntington continued, gesturing to me, was creation. She took raw materials and vision and created value out of nothing. That is not rustic, Brad. That is power. And frankly, it is the only thing at this table that interests me right now. She picked up her wine glass and took a sip. Now, she said, unless anyone else has something foolish to say, I would like to order my lunch. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. My father looked like he had swallowed a lemon. My mother was pale. Brad was staring at his plate, his ears burning. But it was Chloe who terrified me. She was not looking at her plate. She was looking at me. Her face was perfectly still, but her eyes were dead. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. For years she had looked down on me with pity. She had tolerated me because I was beneath her. I was the ugly duckling who made her look like a swan. But in that moment the dynamic shifted. I was no longer beneath her. I was a threat. I had humiliated her husband. I had won over her mother-in-law. I had stolen her spotlight. Under the table I felt her foot move again. This time she didn't kick me. She pressed her heel down hard on my toe and ground it into the floor. I looked at her. She smiled a terrifying, empty smile. "So happy for you, Brianna," she whispered, so only I could hear. "Enjoy it while it lasts." I pulled my foot away. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I realized then that my parents were greedy and Brad was arrogant, but Chloe was dangerous. I turned back to Mrs. Huntington and forced a smile. "I would love the sea bass, please," I said to the waiter. Lunch continued, but the war had officially begun. And I had no idea that while I was eating sea bass and discussing art, Chloe was already plotting how to steal the one thing that mattered most to me: my voice. The drive back from the St. Regis was silent, but it was the silence of a predator waiting to pounce. My father drove his Mercedes with white-knuckled intensity. My mother stared out the window, her jaw set tight. Chloe and Brad had taken their own car, but I knew they were following close behind. We were heading to the family estate. The place where I had grown up feeling like a ghost was about to become the setting for my exorcism. When we walked into the living room, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The pretense of the happy family lunch evaporated. My father loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch without offering me anything. My mother sat on the sofa, not in a relaxed way, but like a judge taking her bench. Chloe walked in a moment later, kicking off her heels and flopping down next to Mom, looking petulant and spoiled. Brad leaned against the fireplace mantel, trying to look authoritative. I stood in the center of the room. I felt like I was back in high school, being scolded for getting a B+ instead of an A. But I was not a teenager anymore. I was Brianna Jenkins. I was the woman who had impressed Catherine Huntington. "Sit down, Brianna," my father said, pointing to the stiff armchair in the corner. "We need to talk business." I remained standing. "I prefer to stand." "What is this about, Dad?" Desmond scoffed and pulled a thick document out of his briefcase. He tossed it onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. "This," he said, "is your future. I had our lawyers draft it up this morning while you were busy flirting with the old lady. It is an employment contract. Standard stuff, but generous, considering your lack of experience." I looked at the document. The cover page read, "Chloe X, Brad, Lifestyle Brand, Independent Contractor Agreement." "I do not understand," I said. "It is simple, really," my mother interjected, her voice smooth and dangerous. "Chloe is launching a fashion and beauty line next month. It is going to be huge. Brad has already secured the capital, but Chloe is busy with the marketing and the networking. She needs someone to handle the technical side." "The technical side," I repeated. "You mean the designing, the creating, the actual work." "Don't be semantic," Brianna, Brad said from the fireplace. "We are offering you a job. You will be the head designer for the brand. You will create the sketches, source the fabrics, and oversee production." "And whose name will be on the label?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Chloe's, obviously," Chloe said, rolling her eyes. "It is my brand, Brianna. I am the face. I am the one with the followers. You are just the hands." "So you want me to be a ghost designer?" I said, my voice rising. "You want me to do all the work, give you all my ideas, and let you take all the credit while I stay in the shadows?" Again. My father slammed his glass down on the table. "Listen to me, Brianna," he barked. "This is how the world works. You have a little talent, sure, but Chloe has the star power, she has the look, She has the husband with the connections. You are… Well, look at you. You are awkward. You are plain. You are not marketable. He walked over to me, invading my personal space. We are giving you a chance to be useful, he hissed. To contribute to this family's legacy. It is your duty as the older sister to support Chloe. She is the one who is going to take us to the next level. You are just the ladder she climbs to get there. I looked at them, my mother nodding in agreement, Chloe smirking, Brad checking his watch. They truly believed this. They truly believed that my only purpose on this earth was to serve them. I looked at the contract on the table. Then I looked at my father. No, I said. The room went deadly silent. Excuse me? My mother asked, leaning forward. I said no. I repeated, my voice shaking slightly but gaining strength with every word. I will not sign that. I will not be your ghost. I will not be your ladder. I took a step back. I have my own plans. Serena Vance has already offered to back my own label. Under my own name. Brianna Jenkins. Chloe jumped up from the sofa. Her face twisted in ugly rage. You liar, she screamed. Serena Vance doesn't care about you. She just needed a quick fix. You are going to embarrass yourself. You can't start a brand. You are nobody. I am somebody too. Mrs. Huntington, I said quietly. And I am somebody to the 400,000 people following me right now. My father's face turned a deep shade of purple. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You ungrateful little brat. We fed you. We clothed you. We put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay us. By competing with your own sister. By trying to humiliate us. I am not trying to humiliate you, I said. I am just trying to exist. If you walk out that door, my mother stood up, her voice rising to a shriek. If you walk out that door, Brianna, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? We will cut you off. We will tell everyone you are mentally unstable. We will tell the press you are a thief. We will ruin you. I looked at my mother, the woman who had birthed me, the woman who was supposed to protect me, and I realized she was not protecting me. She was protecting her investment. Go ahead, I said. Tell them whatever you want. But remember one thing. The world is watching now, and they like the extra a lot more than they like the villain. I turned around and walked toward the door. Brianna. Come back here, my father roared. I forbid you to leave. I opened the heavy oak door. The afternoon sun flooded into the dark hallway. Goodbye, Dad, I said. And by the way, the contract needs work. You forgot to include a clause for self-respect. I slammed the door shut behind me. As I walked to my car, I heard the sound of glass shattering inside the house. My father had thrown his scotch glass against the wall. My hands were trembling as I fumbled for my keys. I was terrified. I had no safety net. I had no family. I was completely alone. But as I started the engine of my rusted Honda, I felt something else, something lighter, something cleaner. I was free. I drove away from the estate, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror until it was just a speck. I was homeless in a way, but for the first time in 29 years, I was finally going home to myself. I didn't know then that the war was far from over. I didn't know that Chloe was already plotting her revenge. I didn't know that my refusal to sign that contract would lead to the greatest betrayal of my life. But I knew one thing. I would never be their ghost again. The next 14 days were a blur of caffeine, adrenaline, and the smell of old leather. I barely left my apartment. I barely slept. Serena Vance had wired the seed money into my account, and suddenly the dream that lived in my head had to become a reality on a runway in New York City. The pressure was suffocating, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I was not creating to fix something that was broken or to hide in the background. I was creating to be seen. My entire life was contained in a single object. It was a battered sketchbook bound in distressed cognac leather that I had found at a flea market 5 years ago. It went everywhere with me. It slept on my pillow. It sat next to my shower. Every page was filled with detailed charcoal drawings, fabric swatches taped into the margins, and frantic notes about draping and structure. It was my Bible. It contained the entire collection I was planning to debut at New York Fashion Week. Designs that were personal. Designs that told the story of a girl who was discarded and found her worth in the wreckage. I called the collection Reclamation. I was hunched over my work table, shading the hem of a denim evening coat when I heard a knock at the door. It was not the aggressive pounding of the bodyguards or the entitled rapping of my parents. It was a soft, hesitant sound, almost like a child asking for permission to enter. I froze. I checked the peephole. It was Chloe. But it was not the Chloe I was used to. She was not wearing her armor of Chanel and aggressive contouring. She was wearing baggy sweatpants and a hoodie. Her hair, usually blown out to perfection, was pulled back in a messy knot, and she was crying. Real ugly mascara running down the face, crying. I should have ignored her. I should have remembered the way she ground her heel into my toe at the St. Regis. I should have remembered the smirk when she called me a ghost. But I opened the door, because despite everything, she was my little sister. And for 26 years I had been trained to fix her. Brianna. She sobbed the moment the lock clicked. I am so sorry. Please just listen to me. She looked small. She looked broken. I stepped back, allowing her to enter. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air in the room changed, but I was too tired to notice the shift. I was running on 3 hours of sleep and too much empathy. What do you want, Chloe? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. I am working. I know, she hiccuped, wiping her nose on her sleeve. I know you are busy. I just had to escape. It is Brad. It is his family. They are eating me alive, Brianna. You have no idea what it is like. She slumped onto my sofa, burying her face in her hands. They hate me, she muffled through her palms. Mrs. Huntington calls me daily to criticize my flower choices. Brad is obsessed with this business launch. He screams at me if I am not posting on Instagram every hour. I feel like a doll in a glass box. I miss you. I miss when we were kids and we would just hide in your room and draw. My chest tightened. I remembered those days. Before she became the golden child and I became the scapegoat, we had been allies. I walked over and sat on the coffee table in front of her. Why are you here, Chloe? I asked softly. Because you are the only one who tells me the truth, she whispered, looking up with bloodshot eyes. Mom and Dad just see me as a paycheck. Brad sees me as a trophy. You are the only one who actually knows me. I am sorry about the contract. I am sorry about what I said. I was just jealous. You are so talented and I am just a pretty face. It was exactly what I needed to hear. It was the validation I had craved my entire life. My sister admitting I was talented, my sister needing me. My guard didn't just drop, it disintegrated. I let out a long sigh. Do you want some tea? I asked. I have that chamomile blend you like. Please, she said, giving me a watery smile. That would be amazing. I stood up and walked to the kitchenette, which was tucked into the far corner of the studio, behind a partition of hanging fabrics. I filled the kettle. I reached for the mugs. I began the ritual of comfort that was second nature to me. I could not see the living area from the kitchen. I could not see my work table, and I certainly could not see what Chloe was doing. The moment I disappeared behind the fabric wall, Chloe's tears vanished. She did not wipe them away, she simply turned them off like a faucet. She sat up straight, her eyes darting around the room with the precision of a hawk. She saw it immediately. The leather sketchbook lying open on the table under the ring light. She moved. She did not walk. She glided across the concrete floor, silent as a snake. She pulled her phone from her hoodie pocket. She did not use the flash. She had practiced this. Click. Page 1. Click. Page 2. Click. Page 3. She worked with terrifying speed, flipping the pages, taking high-resolution photos of every sketch, every note, every fabric swatch. The evening coat, the velvet trousers, the structural corsets. She captured 5 years of my soul in 30 seconds. Then she saw my laptop. It was open, logged in because I was in the middle of a vendor order. She reached into her pocket again. This time she pulled out a small black USB drive. Brad had given it to her that morning. "Just plug it in for 10 seconds, babe," he had said. "It will do the rest." She jammed the drive into the USB port. A small window popped up on the screen, running a script of green text. She looked toward the kitchen. "Is the water boiling yet?" she called out, her voice trembling perfectly. "Almost," I shouted back, clattering the spoons. "Just looking for the honey." She looked back at the screen. The green bar hit 100%. The spyware was installed. Keylogger, screen capture, remote access. She yanked the drive out and shoved it back into her pocket. She closed the sketchbook. She smoothed the cover. She ran back to the sofa and collapsed into the exact same position she had been in before. When I walked back into the room with 2 steaming mugs, she was shaking. "Here," I said, handing her the tea. "Drink this." "Thank you," she whispered, taking the mug with both hands. "You are the best sister in the world, Brianna. I do not deserve you." I sat down next to her. I put my arm around her shoulders. I let her lean her head on me. I felt protective. I felt like the big sister again. We sat there for 20 minutes. She finished her tea. She told me she was going to stand up to Brad. She told me she was going to support my brand. She told me she loved me. "I have to go," she said, finally standing up. "If Brad finds out I was here, he will be furious. But thank you. I feel so much better." She hugged me. It was a tight squeeze. I hugged her back, pressing my cheek against her hoodie. "Be careful, Chloe," I said. "Do not let them push you around." "I won't," she said, pulling away. "I learned from the best." She walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back and looked at me. Her eyes landed on the sketchbook on the table for a split second. A small, unreadable smile touched her lips. "Good luck with New York," she said. "I have a feeling it is going to be full of surprises." She closed the door. I locked it and leaned my forehead against the cool metal. I felt drained but lighter. I had my sister back. Maybe things were turning around. Maybe I could have both the career and the family. I walked back to my work table. I sat down and ran my hand over the leather cover of my sketchbook. It felt warm. I picked up my charcoal pencil. I felt inspired. I turned to a fresh page and started to draw. I had no idea that I was drawing for a ghost. I had no idea that while I was sketching the future, my sister was sitting in her car outside, uploading my entire life to a server named Chloe X Brad. I had no idea that the tea I had served was the most expensive cup I would ever make. I worked late into the night, blissfully unaware that the countdown to my destruction had already begun. And the person holding the detonator was the one I had just hugged goodbye. 7 days. That was the countdown clock ticking in my head. 168 hours stood between me and the runway at New York Fashion Week. My studio apartment had transformed into a war zone of creativity. Every surface was covered in fabric swatches, thread spools, and coffee cups. The air smelled of burnt steam and ambition. I was exhausted. My fingers were covered in calluses and small needle pricks, but I had never felt more alive. I was finalizing the showstopper piece, a gown made entirely of reclaimed silk parachutes dyed a deep midnight blue. It was going to be the finale. It was going to be my statement to the world that I had arrived. I was humming to myself, pinning a hem, when my phone started to buzz. It was not the gentle vibration of a social media notification. It was a relentless, urgent buzzing that rattled the table. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from the liaison at the bank who was handling the investment funds Serena Vance had set up for me. "Turn on the TV, now. Channel 5. My stomach dropped. Messages like that are never good news. My hands started to tremble as I searched for the remote control buried under a pile of denim scraps. I found it and pointed it at the wall-mounted screen. Please do not let it be a scandal, I prayed. Please do not let Serena have cancelled the funding. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. I was not prepared for what I saw. I was prepared for bad news. I was not prepared for a nightmare. The screen showed the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. It was packed with journalists, photographers, and fashion influencers. Camera flashes were going off like strobe lights, creating a blinding, disorienting effect. At the front of the room stood a massive stage with a sleek white backdrop, and there in giant gold letters was the logo, Chloe X Brad, Reborn. I stepped back, dropping the remote. Reborn. The word echoed in my head. Standing at the podium looking radiant in a white suit was my sister Chloe. Next to her, looking smug and proprietary, was Brad. They looked like royalty. They looked like the golden couple of the year. "Welcome, everyone," Brad said into the microphone, his voice smooth and confident. "We are so thrilling to finally share what we have been working on in secret for the past year. This is not just a fashion brand. This is a movement." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. A secret for the past year. 2 weeks ago, Chloe was crying on my couch, saying she had no purpose. Chloe stepped forward. She smiled that perfect camera-ready smile. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice thick with fake emotion. "Ever since I was a little girl growing up in Atlanta, I have dreamed of this moment. I have always felt a deep connection to nature, to the idea of taking something old and giving it new life." I stopped breathing. Those were my words. That was the opening line of my manifesto. I had written those exact words in my sketchbook 3 years ago. But that was just the beginning. "Now," Chloe said, sweeping her hand toward the curtain behind her, "I present to you the debut collection of Reborn." The curtain dropped. I fell to my knees. On the mannequins behind her were my clothes. Not similar clothes. Not inspired by clothes. My clothes. There was the denim evening coat with the asymmetric collar I had spent 3 weeks draping. There were the velvet trousers with the hidden pockets. There was the corset made from upcycled vintage leather jackets. I crawled closer to the TV screen, my hands shaking so hard I could barely support my weight. I stared at the details. The stitching. The specific way the denim was distressed at the seams. The sashiko embroidery patterns I had developed myself. They were identical. Every single line. Every single concept. My eyes darted to the screen behind the mannequins where digital sketches were being projected. I gasped. Those were my drawings. They were the sketches from my brown leather notebook. The notebook Chloe had looked at while I was making her tea. The notebook I had trusted her with. I watched in horror as the camera zoomed in on a sketch of the parachute gown. The gown I was currently sewing 5 feet away from me. "This piece is my favorite," Chloe narrated, pointing to my drawing. "I call it the midnight sky. It represents the darkness before the dawn. I came up with this concept while I was meditating in Bali last year." "Liar," I screamed at the empty room. "You have never been to Bali. You stole that from me." The audience in the Ritz-Carlton erupted in applause. I saw fashion editors nodding in approval. I saw influencers live streaming the event. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Chloe Jenkins debuts Genius Sustainable Collection." Genius. They were calling her a genius for stealing my soul. I felt like I was going to throw up. The betrayal was physical. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my lungs. I thought about the tea. I thought about how I had held her while she cried. I thought about how I had comforted her while she was actively downloading my life onto a hard drive. Brad stepped back to the microphone, putting a protective arm around Chloe. "We are so proud of this collection," Brad said, beaming. and we are excited to announce that we have already secured exclusive distribution deals with major luxury retailers. Reborn will be in stores next month. Next month. My show was in 7 days. If I showed my collection now, everyone would say I copied her. She had beaten me to the punch. She had released the images first. In the eyes of the law and the court of public opinion, she was the creator and I was the thief. I looked at the half-finished gown on my dress form. 10 minutes ago, it was a masterpiece. Now it was evidence of a crime I didn't commit. My phone started buzzing again. It was a call from the bank. Then a text from the production manager in New York. Brianna, did you see this? Brianna, is this why you wanted funding? Brianna, are you working with your sister? They thought I was part of it. Or worse, they thought I had sold out. I curled into a ball on the concrete floor. The sound of the applause from the TV washed over me like a wave of toxic sludge. I watched my parents in the front row. My mother was wiping away a tear of pride. My father was shaking hands with investors accepting congratulations for raising such a talented daughter. They had won. They had realized they couldn't control me, so they had decided to consume me. They had eaten my talent and regurgitated it as their own success. I looked at my hands. The hands that had cut the fabric. The hands that had bled for this art. They felt useless. I am finished, I whispered to the dust bunnies on the floor. Chloe's voice floated out from the speakers one last time. This is just the beginning, she said, looking directly into the camera with eyes that looked exactly like mine. I have so many more ideas. I cannot wait to show the world what else I am capable of. She blew a kiss to the camera. The screen faded to black as the news segment ended, but the darkness in my apartment was heavier. I lay there paralyzed by the magnitude of the theft. I had no money for a lawyer. I had no proof that those sketches were mine except a physical book that could easily be called a forgery, now that digital timestamps existed on their side. They had the money. They had the press. They had the lie. All I had was a room full of fabric and a broken heart. I closed my eyes and wished I could disappear. I wished I had never opened the door that night. I wished I had remained an extra. Because being the main character in a tragedy was far more painful than being invisible. The silence that followed the news broadcast was heavy enough to crush bones. I sat on my floor, staring at the blank television screen, hoping that if I stared long enough, the last 10 minutes would reverse themselves. I hoped that Chloe would disappear from the podium. I hoped that my designs would vanish from her mannequins. But the universe does not work in reverse. The universe moves forward, and right now, it was moving like a steamroller directly over my life. My phone rang. It was not a social call. It was the private number of the investment banker Serena Vance had assigned to handle my seed funding. I knew what he was going to say before I even answered. I could feel the bad news vibrating through the device. "Hello," I whispered. Brianna the banker's voice was professional but cold. "We saw the broadcast." "I can explain," I said, my voice cracking. "She stole them. Those are my designs. I have the sketches. I have the prototypes right here in my apartment. You have to believe me." There was a pause on the other end. A pause that cost me my future. "It does not matter what we believe, Brianna," he said. "It matters what is public record. Your sister just launched a collection with global distribution. She has the press. She has the dates. In the eyes of the market, she is the originator, and you are the one coming in second." "But they are mine," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "If you launch next week," he continued, cutting me off, "you will be sued for copyright infringement. The liability is too high. We cannot invest in a lawsuit, Brianna. We invest in brands. Until this legal matter is resolved, we are freezing the funds. Do not spend another dime." The line went dead. I dropped the phone. The money was gone. The show was gone. The dream was gone. I looked at the midnight sky gown standing in the corner. The silk parachute fabric seemed to mock me. 10 minutes ago, it was a symbol of my freedom. Now it was just a pile of stolen property. I needed to hear them say it. I needed to hear them admit it. I picked up the phone again and dialed my parents' house. I pictured them sitting in their living room drinking champagne, celebrating their victory, celebrating the theft of their own daughter's soul. My mother answered on the second ring. "Hello," she said. Her voice was light and airy. She sounded happy. "How could you?" I asked. I did not scream. I did not have the energy to scream. I just whispered, "How could you let her do this?" My mother sighed. It was a long, exasperated sigh, like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. "Oh, Brianna, stop being so dramatic," she said. "You are ruining a very happy moment for the family." "Happy," I choked out. "She stole my entire life, Mom. She broke into my house. She photographed my sketchbook. And you helped her. You knew." "Listen to me, Brianna." My mother's voice turned steel cold. "You need to grow up and look at the big picture. Chloe needed this. She was struggling. The Huntingtons were pressuring her to bring something to the table. She needed a win to secure her position in that family. So you sacrificed me," I said. "You fed me to the wolves so Chloe could look important." "We did not sacrifice you," my mother snapped. "We gave you an opportunity to help your sister and you refused. You were selfish. You wanted all the glory for yourself. So we took what was necessary. Think of it as a donation. You have so many ideas, Brianna. Can you not just let your sister have these few?" "Let her have them," I repeated. "She took everything. She is the face of the brand," my mother said, dismissing my pain. "You are the talent, but she is the star. That is the natural order of things. Now stop crying and do not do anything stupid. No one will believe you anyway. She is the golden girl. You are just the bitter sister. Do not embarrass us further." She hung up. I sat there with the dial tone buzzing in my ear. The betrayal was absolute. It was not just about the clothes. It was about the fact that my mother looked at me and saw nothing but fuel for my sister's fire. She did not love me. She used me. An hour later there was a knock at the door. I did not move. I thought it might be Serena. I prayed it was Serena coming to save me again. I dragged myself to the door and opened it. Standing there was a man I did not recognize. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He held a leather briefcase and had the dead shark eyes of a corporate lawyer. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, "I represent Chloe X. Brad Lifestyle and the Huntington Family Trust." He did not wait for an invitation. He walked into my apartment, stepping over a pile of fabric with visible disdain. He placed his briefcase on my cutting table, right on top of a chalk outline I had drawn that morning. "We are here to make you an offer," he said, clicking the latches open. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and a check. "My clients are aware that there may be some confusion regarding the provenance of the Reborn collection," he said, smoothing his tie. "To avoid any unpleasant public scenes, they have authorized me to offer you a consulting fee." He slid the check across the table. $50,000. It was a lot of money to a broke artist, but it was pennies compared to the millions Chloe and Brad would make from my designs. I stared at the check. "And what do I have to do for this?" I asked. The lawyer tapped the paper. "You sign this non-disclosure agreement. You admit that you acted as a consultant on the project. You waive all rights to the designs past, present, and future, and you agree never to speak to the press about your involvement." "And if I don't sign?" I asked, looking up at him. The lawyer smiled. It was not a nice smile. "If you do not sign, Ms. Jenkins, we will sue you. We will sue you for defamation if you claim the designs are yours. We will sue you for corporate espionage, claiming you tried to sabotage the launch. We have lawyers on retainer who cost $1,000 an hour. You have—" He looked around my apartment. "You have nothing. We will bury you in litigation for the next 10 years. You will never work in this industry again. You will be bankrupt by next Tuesday." He checked his watch. "I need an answer now." I looked at the check. I looked at the contract. It was a deal with the devil. If I signed, I would survive. I could pay my rent. I could eat. But I would lose my name. I would lose my voice. I would be confirming everything my parents said about me, that I was just an extra, that I was meant to be in the background. I picked up the check. The paper felt crisp and sharp. "Get out," I whispered. "Excuse me," the lawyer said. "I said get out," I yelled, ripping the check in half. "Get out of my house." The lawyer did not look angry. He looked bored. He picked up his briefcase. "That is a mistake, Ms. Jenkins. A very expensive mistake." He walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back. "By the way," he said, "your sister wanted me to give you a message. She said thanks for the tea." The door slammed shut. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was the silence of a tomb. The sun had gone down while the lawyer was there. The studio was dark. The shadows stretched across the floor, covering my sewing machine, covering my fabrics, covering me. I walked over to the corner and sat down, pulling my knees to my chest. I was back exactly where I had started on New Year's Eve. Alone. In the dark. Rejected by my family. Mocked by the world. But this time, I had no hope. This time, I had no secret weapon. This time, Serena Vance was not coming. She had probably seen the news and written me off as a fraud, too. I looked at my hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. "I am nothing," I whispered to the darkness. They were right. I am just an extra. I buried my face in my hands and let the darkness swallow me whole. I cried for the little girl who just wanted her mother to look at her. I cried for the woman who just wanted to create something beautiful. I cried because for the first time in my life, I truly believed that the bad guys had won. I did not know how long I sat there. It might have been hours. It might have been days. I was drifting in a sea of despair, waiting to drown. But rock bottom has a funny way of becoming a foundation. When you have lost everything, you have nothing left to lose. And a person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the world. I just didn't know it yet. I was too busy mourning my own death to realize that I was about to be reborn for real. I was taping up a box of fabric scraps when the phone rang again. I assumed it was the lawyer calling to harass me into signing the settlement agreement, or perhaps my landlord telling me my lease was being terminated. I had already decided to surrender. I was going to move back to a small town in Ohio where nobody knew my name or my family. I was going to get a job at a diner and never touch a sewing machine again. The dream was dead, and I was currently packing its corpse into cardboard boxes. But when I looked out the window, I saw a black SUV idling in the parking lot. It was not the sleek sedan the corporate lawyer had arrived in. This was a tank. It was armored, tinted, and terrifying. Before I could process what was happening, my door flew open. Serena Vance did not knock. She did not ask for permission. She swept into my studio wearing a floor-length trench coat and sunglasses, looking like a spy from a noir film. Her manager trailed behind her, holding a silver metal briefcase. "Did you sign it?" Serena asked without saying hello. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I dropped the roll of packing tape. "No," I whispered. "Not yet." "Good," Serena said, walking over to the television and ripping the power cord out of the wall. She turned to face me. "Because if you had signed that paper, I would have had to fire you. And I hate firing geniuses." I stared at her. "Serena," I said, my voice trembling. "It is over. You saw the news. They have the copyright. They have the distribution. My investors pulled out. I am toxic." Serena laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. "Toxic," she repeated. "Honey, your sister is a fraud." I watched that press conference. Chloe held up those sketches like she was holding a dead rat. She does not know how to hold a charcoal pencil. She does not know the difference between a bias cut and a straight grain. I have worn more couture than she has ever seen. I know a fake when I smell one. And that girl stinks. But it does not matter what we know. I argued, feeling the tears welling up again. It matters what we can prove. They have digital timestamps. They have witnesses. I have nothing. Serena took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were blazing with an intensity that made me want to stand up straighter. "You think I became the biggest star in the world by being stupid?" she asked. You think I walk into a strange apartment in a warehouse district in the middle of the night without insurance? She snapped her fingers. Her manager stepped forward and placed the silver briefcase on my cutting table. She clicked the latches open. Inside was a laptop and a small black device that looked like a smoke detector. Standard security protocol, the manager said, typing on the keyboard. When we came here on New Year's Eve to fix the dress, my team did a sweep. We installed a temporary surveillance unit in the corner near the ceiling. It is motion activated. It uploads directly to our private cloud. I looked at the device. I had never even noticed it. We usually retrieve them within 48 hours, the manager continued. But honestly, with the tour and the chaos, we forgot about this one until we saw the news this morning. She turned the laptop screen toward me. We scrubbed through the footage, she said. We found this. I looked at the screen. The timestamp read 2 weeks ago. It was the afternoon Chloe came to visit. The afternoon she cried on my sofa. I watched myself walk into the kitchen to make tea. Then I watched Chloe. On the screen, she stopped crying instantly. She sat up. She looked toward the kitchen with a predatory focus. Then she moved. I watched her glide across the floor. I watched her pull out her phone. I watched her photograph every single page of my leather notebook. I felt sick. Seeing it happen was so much worse than imagining it. It was so calculated, so cold. Then the audio kicked in. The microphone on the camera was high quality. I heard myself in the background asking about Honey. Then I heard Chloe's voice crystal clear. She had pulled out her phone to make a call while the spyware was installing on my computer. "Mom, pick up," she whispered. Pause. "Yeah, I am here." It was so easy. She is so desperate for a friend she let me write in. I got the sketches. I got the client list. I am installing the keylogger now. Pause. No, she has no idea. She is making me tea right now. God, she is so pathetic. She actually thinks I care about her little problems. I almost laughed in her face when she hugged me. Pause. Don't worry. By the time she realizes what happened, Reborn will be the biggest thing in Atlanta. And she will be back to being nobody. I watched the video end. I watched myself walk back into the room holding 2 mugs of tea. I watched myself hug the sister who had just called me pathetic. I looked away from the screen. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All the sadness I had felt for the last few days evaporated. In its place was something hot and burning. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. They did not just steal from me. They mocked me. They used my love against me. They laughed at my kindness. I looked at Serena. "We have them," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "We can sue them. We can send this to the police. We can destroy them." Serena shook her head slowly. A wicked smile spread across her face. "Sue them," she scoffed. "Lawyers are boring, Brianna. Courts take years. Settlements are quiet. Do you want money or do you want justice?" "I want them to hurt," I said. "I want them to feel what I am feeling right now." "Then we do not go to the police," Serena said, leaning over the table. "Not yet. If we release this video now, they will spin it. They will say it was a misunderstanding. They will settle out of court and disappear with their millions." She tapped the table with a long manicured fingernail. "No, we let them climb higher. We let them think they have won. We let them walk onto the biggest stage in the world." She looked at me, her eyes gleaming. "New York Fashion Week is in 5 days. Chloe and Brad have spent a fortune buying a prime slot on the runway. They have invited the entire industry. They are going to debut the collection live to the world. And we are going to be there," I asked. Serena nodded. "We are going to be there. But we are not going to sit in the audience. I still have the master control to the venue screens because I am performing the closing ceremony. And you are going to finish that parachute dress." She grabbed my hand. "We are going to hijack their show, Brianna. We are going to let Chloe walk out there and take her bow, and then we are going to show the world exactly who she is. We are going to burn their brand to the ground while the cameras are rolling." She squeezed my hand. "Are you ready to stop being the victim and start being the villain?" I looked at the laptop screen one last time. I looked at Chloe's smiling, lying face. I stood up. I walked over to the box of fabric scraps I had just taped shut. I ripped the tape off. I pulled out the midnight blue silk. I walked back to the sewing machine and turned it on. The light flickered to life. I am not the villain, I said, threading the needle. I am the director, and I am about to call cut. Serena smiled. Get to work, genius. We have a show to steal. The next 5 days were a blur of secrecy and precision. Serena moved me to a private suite in New York. I worked in silence while the world outside buzzed with the hype of Chloe's launch. I saw the billboards in Times Square with my designs under her name. I saw the interviews where she talked about her sustainable vision. Every time I wanted to scream, I just sewed faster. I poured every ounce of my anger into the finale dress. It was no longer just a dress. It was a weapon. And as the lights went down on the opening night of Fashion Week, I stood in the wings, hidden in the shadows, waiting for my cue. My parents were in the front row. Chloe was backstage getting her makeup done. They thought they were the main characters. They had no idea that the extra was holding the remote control. The air inside the venue was electric, a physical weight pressing down on my chest. New York Fashion Week was not just a series of shows, it was a religion, and tonight was the high mass. The runway stretched out like a pristine white tongue, ready to taste the next big thing. And according to the program in every editor's hand, the next big thing was Chloe, ex-Brad reborn. I sat in the darkness of the technical control booth high above the seated audience. To my left sat the lighting director, who had been bribed by Serena Vance with a sum larger than his annual salary. To my right stood Serena herself, arms crossed, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, watching the scene below like a general surveying a battlefield. "Look at them," Serena whispered, pointing to the front row. "They have no idea they are sitting on a trapdoor." I looked down. In the center of the VIP section sat my parents. They looked magnificent and ridiculous all at once. My mother Viola was wearing a gold dress that clashed with the minimalist decor, beaming at the cameras like she had personally sewn every garment. My father Desmond was shaking hands with the CEO of a major department store, laughing too loudly, his chest puffed out with unearned pride. They were basking in the glow of a success they had stolen. And next to them sat the Huntingtons. Mrs. Huntington looked bored, checking her watch, clearly wondering why she was there. Brad sat on the edge of his seat, sweating slightly, trying to look like a fashion mogul, but looking more like a nervous accountant. The lights dimmed, the music started. It was a heavy bass track that vibrated through the floorboards of the booth. The show began. One by one, the models walked out wearing my soul. There was the parachute gown moving like liquid smoke. There was the reconstructed denim jacket with the sashiko stitching I had done by hand until my fingers bled. The audience gasped. Phones were raised, capturing the brilliance of the designs. I saw editors scribbling furiously in their notebooks. I saw the nod of approval from the critics. It was a triumph. My triumph. But the name on the screen above the runway said Chloe. I gripped the edge of the console. Every step the models took felt like they were walking on my heart. "Wait for it," Serena murmured, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "Let her have the moment." The fall is higher from the top. The finale music swelled. The last model exited. The runway was empty for a heartbeat. Then Chloe stepped out. She walked to the center of the stage, bathed in a spotlight so bright it washed out her features. She was wearing a white suit, trying to look like a visionary. She waved to the crowd with a practiced humility that made me sick. She blew kisses. She pointed to our parents in the front row, mouthing, "I love you." My mother stood up, clapping frantically, wiping away tears. My father gave a thumbs up to the crowd, claiming ownership of the moment. Chloe reached for the microphone stand at the end of the runway. She was going to give a speech. She was going to tell the world about her inspiration. She was going to lie. "Now," I said. I didn't shout it, I just said it. The lighting director hit the enter key on his console. On the massive LED screen behind Chloe, the giant logo of Chloe x Brad flickered. It didn't just turn off. It glitched violently, sending a jagged line of static across the 40-foot display. The music cut out instantly. The room went dead silent. Chloe tapped the microphone, confused, thinking it was a technical error. She looked back at the screen, smiling nervously. Then the image stabilized. It was not a logo. It was a video. It was a time-lapse video filmed from an overhead angle. It showed a pair of hands, my hands, sketching on a piece of paper. The charcoal moved across the page with frantic speed, creating the exact silhouette of the parachute dress that had just walked the runway. But it was the timestamp in the corner of the video that made the audience gasp. August 14th, 2021. 2 years ago. The video shifted. It showed another sketch, then another, then a video of me draping the fabric on a dress form in my old apartment. The timestamps were undeniable. Every single design in the collection was documented years before Chloe claimed to have invented them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Mrs. Huntington lean forward, squinting at the screen. I saw Brad stand up, waving his arms at the tech booth, trying to get us to cut the feed. But we were just getting started, Audio Serena said. The video on the screen changed. It was no longer the artistic time-lapse. It was the grainy, high-contrast footage from the security camera in my apartment. The face of Chloe filled the giant screen. She was sitting on my sofa holding her phone. The audio boomed through the stadium speakers, crystal clear, echoing off the walls. Mom, pick up, Chloe's voice sneered. The Chloe on the runway froze. She looked at the giant version of herself looming behind her like a monster. On the screen, the digital Chloe continued. Yeah, I am in. She is so stupid, Mom. She actually thinks I came here to apologize. I am photographing the sketches right now. The audience gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. In the front row, my mother Viola stopped clapping. Her hands froze in midair. But the video didn't stop. And this was the part I had saved just for them. This was the part that would ensure they never recovered. On the screen, Chloe laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. I know I have to pretend to be nice to her, Chloe said to the person on the phone, who we all knew was our mother. But honestly, Mom, once this launch is over, can we just cut her off? She is embarrassing. And then she paused, listening to whatever my mother was saying on the other end. Yeah, I know Dad wants the money, Chloe continued, rolling her eyes on the giant screen. God, they are such greedy old fools, aren't they? Dad thinks he is some business genius, but he is just a leech. And you are just as bad, Mom. Always worrying about appearances. Once I get the Huntington money, I am dumping all of you. I am not going to let you drag me down with your tacky desperation. The silence in the room was absolute. On the runway, the real Chloe stood paralyzed. She looked at the screen, then she looked down at the front row. She looked at our parents. My father Desmond was standing up. His face was a mask of shock. He had spent his whole life using me to prop up Chloe, and now the entire world was watching his golden child call him a greedy leech. My mother looked like she had been shot. She was staring at Chloe with her mouth open, her hand clutching her chest. The daughter she had sacrificed everything for, the daughter she had chosen over me, had just revealed her true face. And then there was Mrs. Huntington. She stood up slowly. She looked at the screen where Chloe was calling her family a meal ticket. Then she looked at Brad, who was cowering near the edge of the stage. Mrs. Huntington did not scream. She did not make a scene. She simply picked up her purse, turned her back on the runway, and walked out of the venue. Her departure was the signal. The spell broke. The audience erupted. It was not applause. It was chaos. Boos started from the back of the room. Journalists were shouting questions. Photographers were rushing the stage, not to capture the beauty, but to capture the disaster. Chloe dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. She looked around, wild-eyed, looking for an escape, looking for someone to blame. She looked up at the control booth. She couldn't see me through the tinted glass, but she knew. She looked right at the window and screamed something that was lost in the noise of the crowd. I stood there high above the wreckage. I looked at my parents who were now arguing with each other, my father pointing a finger at my mother crying hysterically. I looked at Brad who was being blocked by security as he tried to chase his mother. I looked at Chloe who was standing alone on the white runway, surrounded by the beautiful clothes she had stolen, which now looked like evidence in a crime scene. I felt a hand on my shoulder. "It is done," Serena said softly. I looked at the screen where the loop was playing again, showing my hands creating the art, showing the truth. "No," I said, pressing the button to fade the screen to black. "It is not done. Now we finish them." I turned to the lighting director. "Spotlight on the booth," I said. He looked at me surprised. "Do it." A single bright spotlight swiveled from the ceiling and blasted through the glass of the control booth, illuminating me. I stepped forward to the window. I let the crowd see me. I let Chloe see me. I was Brianna Jenkins. I was the extra. I was the ghost. And I had just brought the house down. The sound that erupted inside that venue was not applause and it was not silence. It was a visceral roar of outrage that shook the walls. For a split second, Chloe stood frozen on the runway, a statue of white silk and terror, looking out at a sea of faces that had turned from adoration to disgust in the span of 60 seconds. The giant screen behind her was still frozen on the image of the security footage, the timestamp mocking her, the audio of her voice calling her own parents leeches still echoing in the rafters. Then the first object flew. It was a plastic water bottle thrown from the standing section. It hit the runway with a wet thud, spraying water onto the hem of the stolen parachute dress. That was the signal the mob was waiting for. The booing started low and guttural, then swelled into a deafening chant. Fraud, thief, liar. Brad Huntington finally snapped out of his paralysis. He scrambled up the steps to the stage, his face red with panic, waving his arms frantically at the control booth. "Cut the feed!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Turn it off! You are ruining us!" He lunged toward the LED screen as if he could physically block the truth with his body, but two massive security guards intercepted him before he could reach the backdrop. "Get off me!" Brad yelled, struggling against them. "Do you know who I am? My family owns this building." "Actually, they don't," Serena Vance said, her voice booming over the PA system, cutting through the chaos like a knife. She stood up in the control booth next to me, holding a microphone, looking like a vengeful god. "The Huntington Family Trust pulled their sponsorship 5 minutes ago, Brad. You are trespassing, and you have visitors." The side doors of the venue burst open. These were not Fashion Week security. These were men in windbreakers with yellow letters on the back. FBI, Economic Crimes Division. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. The flashbulbs from the paparazzi went into overdrive, creating a strobe effect that made the scene look like a horror movie. Chloe tried to run. She turned on her heel, tripping over the long train of the gowns, scrambling to get backstage. But an agent stepped out from behind the curtain, blocking her path. She backed away, shaking her head, tears streaming down her face, destroying her perfect makeup. "Ms. Jenkins," the agent said loud enough for the front row to hear, "we have a warrant for your arrest for intellectual property theft and wire fraud." Down on the floor, another team of agents was surrounding Brad. He was still screaming about his father, his lawyers, his rights. I watched as they pulled his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was lost in the noise of the crowd, but the image was unmistakable. The golden boy of the banking world was being dragged away in front of the very people he tried to impress. Serena leaned into the microphone one last time. "These designs belong to Brianna Jenkins," she announced, "and the Vance Management Group is filing immediate charges for grand larceny and investment fraud against Chloe Jenkins and Brad Huntington. We have the digital footprint, we have the confession, and now we have the culprits." I looked down at the front row. My parents were huddled together, but they were not finding comfort in each other. They were being assaulted by the crowd. Not physically, but socially, which for them was far worse. A fashion editor poured her champagne onto my father's shoes as she walked past. People were pointing phones in their faces, playing the audio of Chloe calling them greedy old fools back to them. My mother Viola looked up at the control booth. She saw me standing there in the spotlight. She reached out a hand, her mouth moving silently, screaming my name. She looked old. The mask of the wealthy matriarch had melted away, leaving a terrified woman who realized she had bet on the wrong horse and lost the farm. My father tried to push through the crowd to get to the agents, probably to distance himself from Chloe, to claim he was a victim too. But the crowd blocked him. He was trapped in the cage of his own making, surrounded by the elite society he worshipped, who were now looking at him like he was a disease. I watched as the police led Chloe away. She looked up at the booth one last time. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked small. She looked like the little girl who used to ask me to fix her dolls. But I didn't feel pity. I felt the cold, hard weight of justice. I turned away from the window. "Let's go," Serena said, putting a hand on my back. "The show is over." 90 days later, the air in Manhattan tasted different. It tasted like freedom. I stood on the balcony of my new atelier in Soho, looking down at the cobblestone streets. The sign on the door behind me read, "Brianna Jenkins Design House." Inside, 20 seamstresses were working on my spring collection. There was no denim quilt on the floor, there was no pizza box, there was only light and the hum of industry. My phone on my desk rang. I walked over and looked at the caller ID. It was a number from Atlanta, but not the estate line. It was a prepaid cell phone number. I picked it up. "Hello," I said. "Brianna." It was my father, but the booming, arrogant voice was gone. He sounded frail. He sounded broken. "Dad," I said simply. "Brianna, please don't hang up," he said, his voice trembling. We saw the article in Vogue, the cover story. You look beautiful, honey. Truly beautiful." I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. "Things are hard here, Brianna," he continued, his voice cracking. "The lawyers. They took everything. We had to sell the house to pay the settlement for the investors Brad defrauded. Your mother and we are in a 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur. The mold is bad for her asthma." He paused, waiting for me to offer help, waiting for the daughter who used to fix everything to jump in. "And Chloe?" I asked. He sighed. "Brad divorced her the day after the arrest. He invoked a morality clause in the prenup. She got nothing, Brianna. Zero. She is living on our couch. No one will hire her. She is not doing well." I looked around my office. I looked at the mood board on the wall filled with sketches for the Met Gala. "I am sorry to hear that," I said. "Brianna, look," his voice turned desperate. "We are family. I know we made mistakes, but we are blood. We need help, just a loan, until we get back on our feet. You are rich now. You have millions. $50,000 would change our lives. Please, for your mother." I closed my eyes. I remembered the $50 bill he had told me to buy pizza with. I remembered him telling me to stay home because I was a distraction. I remembered him sitting in my apartment telling me to sign my rights away. "Dad, do you remember New Year's Eve?" I asked. "What?" "Yes, of course," he stammered. "You told me that if I didn't show up, no one would notice. You told me I was just an extra in the movie of your lives." "Brianna." "I didn't mean—" "I am realizing you were right, Dad," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Extras don't save the main characters. Extras don't pay the villain's legal bills. Extras just fade into the background." "But you are not an extra," he pleaded. "You are our daughter. You are the star." "No, Dad," I said, gripping the phone. "I am the director now, and I am writing you out of the script." I hung up the phone. I blocked the number. I walked back out to the balcony. The sun was setting over the Hudson River, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It looked just like the colors of a bruised heart that had finally healed. I was alone in a new city, but I wasn't lonely. I had Serena. I had my team. And most importantly, I had myself. They wanted me to be the shadow so they could shine. They wanted to bury me so they could grow. But they forgot that I was a seed. And while they were busy fighting for the spotlight, I was busy building the sun. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, sharp air of New York City. My name is Brianna Jenkins. I was the girl they tried to erase. Now I am the one holding the pen. And this is just the first chapter. This story reminds us that our value is never defined by those who cannot see our worth, even if they are family. We often waste years seeking validation from people committed to misunderstanding us, fearing that their rejection will destroy us. But as Brianna discovered, being cast aside is often the universe's way of clearing the stage for your true destiny. The labels others place on you, whether extra or failure, are not your reality. True freedom comes when you stop waiting for permission to shine and finally pick up the pen to write your own chapter. You are the director of your life. Hit that like button and subscribe if you are ready to reclaim your power and turn your pain into your greatest victory.